Alright, here we are at the LZ. I haven't been to this spot in a long time either. Superstition Mountains, way back there, that's where we're flying today. I got the Mav Max today, and I got the E-Ride Pro. So I'm gonna go try to ride that real quick before my buddy David gets here. But what I wanted to talk about today, this has been a big conversation topic among friends and comments on YouTube ever since the incident with Josh.
Oh,
which if you missed that video, go back. It's a couple videos where the microburst hit us and Josh tossed his reserve. A lot of people have been talking about what to do when you encounter turbulence. So I figured we'd talk about that today in kind of a brief vlog format, and maybe we'll get some live demonstrations depending on how the air is tonight. But outside of that, a project I'm working on in the background is a virtual ground school where I'm gonna sit down and teach things like weather, FR 103, airspace, things like that. I wanna do it really, really well, where it's actually good quality information and have a paywall for it. So people that actually want the information can get it. And I thought one of the other in-depth side series that I could do is like motor maintenance, how to fly in turbulence, deep dives, really high quality videos. Let me know what you guys think about that idea. Aside from that, I'm gonna unload the bike. We're gonna go ride around a little bit. This is an off-road vehicle staging area, and then we'll go fly.
woo! Holy shit. No, there's a drop there. We're up in the air, obviously, if you couldn't tell by now. And unfortunately, it seems like the winds are staying way strong, that I'm not even going to worry about trying to get all the way out to the superstitions with the wind conditions. So we'll just plow around in the desert here and talk about flying in turbulence. Alright, let's try flying this little dirt bike trail that I was riding before. So the first thing, before you say what to do when you encounter turbulence, is when should you do anything when you encounter turbulence? Now, if you were to define like a bump scale, 0 being absolutely smooth, 10 being like catastrophic collapses, I personally, and my feeling is somewhere around like 7 to 10 scale is when, if you're not doing anything, you might be just taking collapses on your glider. So for me, in my personal range, 7 to 10 is when I start to go into what I call fight mode, where I need to actively do something to keep my glider from collapsing. Now here's the thing, there's kind of two trains of thought, and some people will say that when you get into this level of turbulence that is collapse worthy and you should be in what I call fight mode. Some people say that you should just trim out your glider, set it to the fastest possible speed, and quote unquote cut through the turbulence. And while there is some validity to that theory, I disagree with it. Because the thing is, as you trim out on your glider, and especially a modern day reflex glider, the faster you go, the harder it is to collapse the glider. So it becomes more and more resistant to collapse, but the consequences of actually taking a collapse are much, much worse. So that's kind of a passive solution to flying in turbulence. My train of thought is active flying to mitigate collapses in turbulence. All right, so here's my train of thought when, let's say it's something like a microburst situation, like what happened in our previous video, or let's say you're flying around and you mistakenly fly behind a mountain where there's rotor, and all of a sudden shit hits the fan and you need to actively do something to prevent your glider from collapsing. The first thing I think about is altitude. This is going to depend, because sometimes you can find cleaner air by going up or down depending on the situation. But the main thing I want to keep in mind with altitude is that I'm at an altitude high enough to throw my reserve. That's kind of a safe zone, because if everything goes to shit, I have my reserve right down here on my right side, and I can toss that sucker out, and that's going to save the day, but I can only do that if I'm at a safe altitude. Now, there's been reserve throws from 50 to 100 feet, which is super low. I think 300 to 400 feet is still in the range of pretty low. In a previous Reacting to Crash videos, we saw someone that burned 1,000 feet before they got the reserve out. So ideally, I want to be at an altitude of like at least 1,000 feet high. That way, my backup plan is valid. I can throw my reserve if I need to. The next thing I think about is posture. Now, if you notice right now, this is my normal flying posture, which is legs crossed, neutral body position, and, you know, just arms out to the side on the brakes. When the turbulence gets really bad, what I find myself doing is I get my legs crossed and I kind of elevate my legs, scooch a little bit forward in the harness, and almost get this reclined angle where you can see I can actively weight shift that harness with my hips. I like that for a few reasons. One, I want to be neutral. Two, I'm feeling exactly what the glider is doing. I want to feel what's happening in the risers through my harness. And also, if I do take a collapse, I want to be in a posture that's ready to throw my body to one side or the other to fly the open side. So if I took a collapse on the right side, I want to immediately get my weight on this left riser to keep the flying side flying. I don't like when people go starfish and legs spread, all willy-nilly like. I like to get my posture set in my fight mode. Let's go under these power lines. I know everyone's going to freak out in the comments and say I have a death wish, I'm going to get electrocuted. Tucker, that's highly irresponsible. But guys, look at me. I'm flying around this tower and I'm not getting electrocuted. So take that, haters. Next thing I think about is throttle. In turbulence, what feels the best, and I think what loads the glider the best, is being at idle and descending. It really feels weird when you're in active choppy air to be on the throttle and climbing. In some scenarios though, like if you're low and you want to get higher to be able to throw your reserve, you might have to be on your throttle. But if I have a choice, I want to be either at cruise or descending, because that puts me kind of in a better feeling for the turbulence. The other thing to know about throttle is if I mess up or I fly into something that's just unrecoverable and I do take a collapse, immediately you want to drop your throttle for two reasons. Two come to mind. One is torque twist, which was very applicable to Josh's situation. He torque twisted immediately when he took his collapse, which may have been due to a throttle engaging the torque. And also, you don't want to suck in lines, which is what happened in Josh's situation. The lines went slack and they got caught up in the prop. So if I can, I want to be descending at idle if I have the altitude. If I can't, then cruise is the next best bet. And I want to be ready and mindful that if something happens, I'm going to come off throttle. And I know that in these situations, it's scary and everything happens fast. And your body might not even think drop throttle, but I want to be kind of prepared for it. All right, finally and most important, and these were not in any order of importance, but most important in my mind, contrary to the first school of thought that I talked about, with just trimming out and letting the glider do the work, what I like to do is trims neutral immediately. When you get in really vicious air, I want to be trim neutral. Now, you can go all the way closed on ozone gliders. I personally feel most comfortable at the neutral trim setting and start actively piloting. So when I'm actively piloting, you can see where my hands are now. Up here is just willy-nilly. I'm not doing anything with the brakes. Normal flying position is you take the slack out of the lines and you get to like the first bit of tension. And this is where I'm just flying normally. But when I get in really active air and I'm in fight mode, I want to be a little bit deeper than that. I want to be holding more pressure, kind of slowing the glider down. But mainly, the thing to know is brake deflection prevents glider deflations. So basically, a paramotor is a giant pendulum, both side to side and forward and aft. And when you're flying in turbulence, you may get rocked left to right. doesn't really matter as much. It's less significant than getting rocked forward and aft. So when you're hitting turbulent air, the glider is going to be surging and it's going to be falling behind you. And basically what you want to be doing is trying to keep it above your head. So if you fly into turbulence and you feel the glider go back behind you, you want to go hands up. But you need to anticipate that the glider might try to surge forward, and when it tries to surge forward, you want to get deep into your brakes, because adding brake pressure is going to keep that glider from overshooting past above your head. And when it does that, that's when the angle of attack becomes negative and the glider collapses. When you get into that fight mode, first off, just getting deeper into the brakes and holding more pressure than normal, that's going to help you just off the bat. Then actively feeling what the glider's doing and responding and making your movements to accommodate for that, that's called active piloting. And it's hard to describe exactly because it's kind of a feeling thing, it's kind of a finesse thing, and you kind of just have to learn it. And you can learn a lot of it by kiting in, like midday active air on the ground is a good way to kind of develop that muscle memory where you aren't looking at the glider, but you're feeling inputs in your risers or through your kiting harness if you're kiting, and you're responding autonomously with your hands to keep that glider centered above your head. The last and final thing I want to talk about is reserve readiness. You're doing all those things, but you want to keep in mind that you have your last resort. Hopefully, everyone should fly with one, and if you don't have one, visit tuckergott.com, email me info@tuckergott.com, and I can help you get set up with a reserve. I encourage everyone to fly with one, but you always want to be aware that you've got this to save yourself if all hell breaks loose and you take a collapse and you're coming down. If you guys remember in some of my earlier videos, I don't think I've done it or said it recently, but sometimes I'll be like doing a practice touch on your reserve handle right here on the side, or making sure that that handle is propped up and ready to go depending on what type of reserve you have. But it's good to know that you have that right there and ready to go. And the theory is, like, you shouldn't be scared to throw your reserve. If all hell breaks loose, you want to be knowing that you should get your reserve out before it gets worse. Because when you have a malfunction, in Josh's case, it was a really bad malfunction. There's a whole range of, it could just be a cravat and it could be something you could fix, but it could be a streamer situation like Josh where he basically went into free fall. And in that case, there's no dealing with it, it's just throw the reserve ASAP. Another scenario is if you take a collapse and half the wing gets hung up and you start in a rapid spiral. A rapid spiral is really bad because a lot of times, even if you try to time it, you throw the reserve out and then the glider comes back around and it balls up the reserve and it never inflates. So the thought process is you want to get that out before it gets worse into an unrecoverable situation. Now, like I said, there are situations where it could just be a collapse, wham, bam, I got the brake deflection, I got it back, we're flying, we're not stalled, and it's just an instant. In that case, yeah, don't throw your reserve, but you want to be ready, willing, and able to use it in those scenarios where things are getting really bad. This Viper XC is flying real nice. I haven't flown this baby in a while. I've been flying the Viper 6. Yeah, she'll get converted. Oh yeah, baby. I tightened out the tip steering on this glider a little bit, and she flies nice. Look at this guy, just foot dragging the desert. His poor E-prop. Alright, time for a quiet glide down. Not very high, but it'll do. What's the windsock doing down there? I don't even know. We're gonna crash land if I don't find out in time.
The last thing I want to add is this advice is just my approach to turbulence. I'm not saying it's the right approach, but this is how I deal with it. An A-rated glider like a Mojo is going to be more susceptible to collapse and less resistant to collapse, but the repercussions of it collapsing is going to be much better. It's going to reinflate easier with less pilot input. Whereas something like a Freeride or the Viper XC I was flying in this video is going to be much more resistant to collapse, but if you do take a collapse, it's going to be much more dramatic. There's a balance in there as well. And for example, when I flew the Icarus race, I flew a Freeride 19 meter, and what I realized was it was a lot more resistant to collapse than I ever expected. Because I was flying for hours on end throughout the middle of the day, I got really, really comfortable kind of out of necessity on that glider because my arms were just getting tired. What I realized was I was flying through midday bumps so bad that at points I was kind of getting light in my seat. That's a specific example for the Freeride, but my point is to say that a 7 out of 10 is actually a lot worse than you might expect. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed. The winds are looking beautiful this afternoon, so I think I'm gonna go do some more flying and filming. Till the next episode, have fun, fly safe, peace.